Today by a guest who's been in studio here before, Tim Faulkner with EcoRI. I appreciate your taking the time to come in.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
We were just commenting on how great it smells in the studio because 3 o'clock was the taste with Rick Simone with some great Fall River restaurant and shopping destinations, and it smells fantastic.
Yes, it smells making me very hungry.
Well, we're hoping we'll have some food for Tim when he gets off, but we're going to put him through his paces before he does so. There's a lot going on in the environmental front and probably going over a few topics today, but the one I really wanted to have Tim come in on, offshore drilling. We saw a little bit of a hiccup. The president had proposed this last fall. We did see the Department of Interior move forward with this, and we've also seen the response. We've seen governors from states up and down the eastern seaboard saying that they want to reject this. There was supposed to be an event here in Providence tomorrow pertaining to public input, but because of the shutdown, that got put on hold, but we don't know the new date now moving.
Right, they just emailed me like a few minutes ago and told me that they haven't rescheduled them yet. There's about 5 of them, including one in Boston that would have been, I think, today, and one tomorrow that was scheduled for Providence, but no new date yet.
No new date. And when you thought and when folks thought that this date was going to be happening, do you anticipate when it happens in the future that a lot of people will show up in opposition to this?
Oh, definitely, yeah, because I think every environmental group from Save the Bay to Fossil Free Rhode Island and just, even some of the more cursory environmental groups are really coming out for this one. There was going to be a march from the State House down to the Marriott where they were going to have that public meeting, and they were really putting out the announcements in the news to get there, and from all levels of government too. From Washington, all the senators are trying to oppose this, and the governors. So yeah, there'll be a lot of people there when they do finally have it.
When they do finally have it, and this is not a surprise. We heard from Trump about this through the campaign that if elected, that he was planning on doing this. So not a surprise. But do states have the ability to opt out?
I don't know if they. I'm not sure. You never know what's going on with government today, but. I don't know if they can opt out, and I know that Florida said that they were able to opt out. They got an exemption from the Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, but
why did Florida get the exemption?
Well, I don't know. I think there might have been maybe that the president's got his Mar-a-Lago down there and other real estate that could have helped. But
so sort of not in my backyard, sort of Kennedy-esque,
exactly. Yeah, totally. I think there's a lot of, and you can imagine the kind of pressure that's going to come from every industry, right? From tourism and fishing, they're all going to really oppose this in a big way. So I'd imagine that what they got from Florida is just going to be magnified, 100 times, because it's the East Coast, the West Coast, all of Alaska, where they're trying to open this. The whole area is about 1.9 billion miles offshore, so this is huge.
And it's been protected since the 80s.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they originally, I think they put a moratorium in, other than I think the Gulf of Mexico, maybe a couple other spots. They banned offshore drilling, and now they're, it's trying to make it fair game.
Are there really resources on the East Coast, oil, things to extract to open it up? We do know the areas that are mineral rich, Alaska, the Gulf, but is there that type of possibility for the East Coast, and especially here in New England?
Yeah, I think, there must be. They conducted some oil exploration within the past year and a half. I haven't seen what the results of that were, but they say that there's, a few billion gallons or hundreds of billions of gallons of oil, and that may not be off of New England or not, but it's just kind of scary to think that, it's a lot of area. It goes from 3 miles, which is where the state border ends offshore, to about another almost up to 350 miles. So it's a huge area. And even some of that, a little sliver of that is between Block Island and the mainland in Rhode Island. So
there's
an area that technically
could be open. You could bring in a rig and just start drilling right off of Block Island.
That's federal waters there. So yeah, they could if they wanted to, if they approved it.
I saw a map, and again, I saw Florida in that area of opposed, but now we know they have the exemption. But did it look like Maine was fine because of political reasons?
Well, Maine, I think the governor of Maine was the only one, Paul LePage, who seemed to be in favor of it.
Yes.
But the senators from Maine have opposed it, as have all other New England senators, except for Vermont. I guess they're not on the coast, but they have Senator Whitehouse introduced a bill to ban all offshore drilling off of New England, and all the New England governors signed on to it. So, Maine could be an outlier, but I don't know if they'll have much leverage.
It's interesting with politics because I've also seen that Republican states with Republican governors, I believe a third that have coastline, oppose this as well.
Mhm.
How much of an impact would offshore drilling have environmentally? Is the rationale, is Trump trying to say, well, it's offshore? I mean, how much of an impact would this have on the environment? I mean, it depends on the size of the operation, how many of them are up and down the coast, but what is it that's getting folks just so up in arms and saying, we don't want this?
Well, I think for Rhode Island at least, they look back to a couple of oil spills that were pretty minor. There was one, I think, in '89 that was off of, I'm getting the years confused, but there was one off of Newport and then one that was off South Kingstown, off Moonstone Beach. One was an oil barge and one was an oil tanker. And, they released a couple 100,000 gallons of oil each, and they caused some pretty significant damage. I mean, Rhode Island's a small state, so it doesn't take much to really have an impact on it. So it's hard to say, but, it's probably very little damage unless something goes wrong.
So is the next step, I mean, we know we're waiting to hear when the meeting is here in Providence and folks will turn out for that, but at the federal level, what's the process at now?
Well, they're taking public comment, so you can go online to the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management website and you can comment until March 9th.
Okay.
And you can let them know how you feel about it. So that's the process right now. And I don't know if there's an exact timeline on it, but I think probably by the summer or something like that, they'll have all the meetings wrapped up and looking to make a decision.
And the decision-making process lies?
Well, it lies with the Interior Secretary and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. I think you can ultimately make the decision. Now, of course, it will be contested, as many governors and other people have said they're going to appeal it, especially if Florida gets an exemption and other states don't. They will, they'll definitely try and settle this in court. So realistically, it's probably a couple years away from any offshore oil rigs going off of Rhode Island.
But people are watching it very carefully. Again, we'll provide that update when that meeting is rescheduled for here in Providence. They're having them around New England, so keeping an eye on offshore drilling. Tim Faulkner has written about it on EcoRI, so be sure to check out his recent article on that as well. A couple other big things going on in the environmental world. Today we heard from President Trump tariffs potentially for solar. What's the reaction been to this? How would that look? And again, is this just along the lines of what we've come to expect from this administration?
Yeah, you're right. It's probably what we've come to expect from the administration. I think that, as you can see, they're heavily favoring the fossil fuel industry, and there's always been some resentment towards the renewable energy sector, even though there's a lot more jobs and it's growing much more quickly than, like the coal industry. It's really emerging and very robust. But I guess the reaction to it has been kind of mixed. I talked to a couple local solar developers that do the smaller residential solar panel installations, and they think it'll increase their costs a little bit, but probably nothing that because the demand is so strong, the incentives are so good, that they see that it is sort of a minor inconvenience and maybe see the prices go up modestly. Whereas the bigger solar installers, maybe Deepwater Wind is getting into solar big time. There's a few other ones in Rhode Island that could, when you're talking about a few $1 million on a large scale solar project, that's significant. So it could probably affect them more than it would than the smaller people, the smaller companies.
It is just the rationale from the Trump administration that this is money. This is just them attempting to extract some taxes on a booming industry.
Right. Yeah, because it seems like it's kind of cherry picking, right? There's so many things that you could put tariffs on, and to put it really just on, and I guess they did it on some appliances as well, but I don't know. It just seems like it's more trying to just, kind of put mud in the eye of the renewable energy sector.
So try to keep the playing field a little uneven, if you will.
Yes. Yeah, and let them know that Trump is, wants the fossil fuel guys to make sure that they're getting their fair share.
Could this have a chilling effect on the solar industry?
I mean, I think possibly, if there's more to it, if you see that maybe there's some reaction from some of these international solar companies that, really maybe they go out of business or something like that. But there's so many markets right now, other than the United States, that are booming. Obviously all over Europe and Asia that are embracing solar energy. So I think it's going to be a small inconvenience for everybody, and maybe not even much of anything for some of these smaller installers.
So we'll see moving forward. But from your vantage point, here we are in 2018. How have you seen the solar industry grow in Rhode Island? And let's start from the residential perspective.
Yeah, I think the incentives are excellent, and I know that the state is really trying to get the word out as best they can. But I think with the incentives that they have right now, that you can get payback, meaning get your investment on if you buy a solar installation for your home, probably within 8 years, maybe less or maybe fewer. But yeah, I mean that's a pretty good deal. I think if you can after that you get your payback on it, you're basically getting your electricity for free. So it's a pretty good investment. I think people that compare it to something like a CD or other type of investment, you're getting somewhere between 8 and 10% return on your money. So it's a really good idea, and obviously it helps the environment.
Do you see when there's issues, when there's storms, when there's issues with power outages with National Grid, do you see like an uptick? Have you heard from solar suppliers that people say they want to have some power in their own hands, so to speak?
A little bit. I've talked to some of the solar installers, and they always get questions about trying to have their off-the-grid solar panels, because most of the ones that you get now, you have to be tied to the
You're
grid,
on the grid,
especially if you want to get the incentives. But the idea of having your own kind of solar power generator, I think there's definitely a lot of interest in that. You're seeing that companies like Tesla and others are embracing this either from manufacturing side or from offering this as a package to some of the new solar installations. So it's I think we're in the very early stage, and Rhode Island's never on the forefront of a lot of these things. So people are doing it, and you're going to see more of it because the prices are coming down, and the availability of the the products that you can get for having like a in-home battery that's charged by solar panels. It's just going to get easier, and there's going to be more options.
Well, we'll continue to follow that as well. So, offshore drilling, tariffs on solar, updates on what's going on with Invenergy and Barville.
Okay, so today there was supposed to be a hearing on January 30th, which was kind of significant because Invenergy, who's the developer of this power plant, is trying to, one of the big things was they're going to try and have the ratepayers pay for connecting the power plant to the electric grid. And that's no small cost. There's estimates has been as high as a couple $100 million for that cost. So you can see why they would want to not have to pay that. But the Energy Facility Siting Board has said this is kind of new. You've always promised that you're not going to make the ratepayers pay for this project. So there's going to be a hearing next week where they were going to have to kind of discuss this and maybe wait until this issue is settled with Invenergy, because they had a couple lawsuits about trying to get the ratepayers to pay for this. So today Invenergy said that they are withdrawing one of those lawsuits, and as a result the Energy Facility Siting Board has canceled the hearing for next week. There were two lawsuits, and Invenergy withdrew one of them, and that I guess was enough for the Energy Facility Siting Board to say, all right, then we don't need to have the show cause hearing next week. However, Conservation Law Foundation, who is in opposition to the power plant, has said, wait a minute, I think we should still have this other hearing because the other part of the lawsuit is still in effect. Now, I'm not sure what the details are on that other lawsuit, but you're going to see that there's a little bit of disagreement over whether or not the case is closed on whether or not the application should go forward for the power plant.
And so would you say this is a critical piece in the process?
I think so. I mean, I think the way Conservation Law Foundation has been presenting it is that this sort of couple $100 million is going to be kind of a make or break for Invenergy. So
it sounds critical.
Yeah, and if they've said that they don't want to pay it, and maybe if they don't, maybe it's a sign that they are pulling out, but probably not. But maybe that they're gonna pay for it, or try and find a creative way to have somebody else pay for it.
Another critical piece of the juncture with the proposed power plant up in Barville. Speaking of being up places, you're often at the State House.
Yes. Yep.
Quite often. What's on your plate? What's on the agenda this year? What are you looking to in the 2018 General Assembly session?
Yeah, I think this year they've tried the environmental bills have always had a focus on climate change. Some of the bigger ones, there's renewable energy incentives. There's always a couple of those every year that get expanded or updated a little bit. And they've been trying for a couple of years to pass a carbon tax or a fee on any fossil fuels that come into Rhode Island, you pay a tax on it at the pump, or maybe when it comes in through the pipeline into the state, you pay a fee on that, and then that fee is returned as a dividend to residents and to businesses, and it helps support renewable energy projects and other things. So that's worked in British Columbia, and other places have done these, and they've been very successful as a way to really incentivize renewable energy and kind of cut the fossil fuel use. So there's a bill for that. It's the third year, and hopefully that'll pass this
And you
year.
talk about British Columbia, any place in the States?
Well, no, I don't. I think maybe some. I think I'm drawing a blank. I think that Seattle or the state of Washington defeated it in a referendum a couple years ago.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
But states keep looking to it
Yeah.
as a model.
yeah, and if Rhode Island passes it, they're not going to pass it unless Massachusetts and maybe another state in the Northeast approves it as well. So that way, it's just
It's
not-
regional.
Yeah, I mean, that's a regional thing. So carbon tax is always one that gets a lot of attention. There's going to be a public meeting on it next week when the bills are introduced, so look for those.
Okay, gonna keep an eye on the carbon tax. Anything else we should keep an eye on up there?
Let's see, there's always, every year they try and introduce a bag ban, a statewide bag ban, and we're seeing more cities and towns, adopt these, so that's something that's going to get a lot more attention.
Do you think that's the way? Are we going to see more cities and towns before a state were to take a statewide action?
Probably, I think you're going to, especially the coastal communities, they're the ones that seem to be embracing this because, they pick up these bags on the, coastal cleanups and it gets in the water and causes all kinds of problems. So you'll probably see more of the coastal communities, maybe more in the West Bay, starting to adopt that. But eventually I think it's going to happen. I think there'll be a statewide one.
And, is there an enforcement mechanism, or is it really trying to just nip it in the bud, so to speak, so having stores not actually use them? But, how much is it enforced, if you will? So
Yeah,
are there people who try to slide by it? Or is it just understood that just at the get-go, no plastic bags?
Yeah, I think that they, because the communities that have done it, with the exception of Newport, which is a big, is a city, a lot of it has just been on the honor system, and will be, I think, enforced. It can be enforced by the police department, but typically they'll go, I think, to maybe if there's the planning department or something like that will address any complaints. I know in Barrington when they first did it, a couple of stores had some thicker plastic bags and somebody complained about
this.
it, and they went and they got
So they take care of it more at that kind of.
Yeah, kind of community policing, I
Yes.
think, where they do that. And so, a lot of the stores are chain stores, so, for them to suddenly switch gears, I think that wouldn't go unnoticed. And
So what will we see first? A statewide plastic bag ban or legalized marijuana?
that's a good question. Yeah, probably marijuana.
But you can put the odds on it at a sports betting book. Here in
I know,
Rhode
I just heard
Island.
about that today. That's, wow, that's going to really change everybody's lifestyle, I think, if they can just gamble.
Are we gonna have those sort of odds? You hear all the the silly things, not even just the games, but the odds on things happening. We'll see.
Oh yeah,
We'll see if sports betting happens.
definitely. Yeah, sports will be going to a whole new level.
But continue to read EcoRI and Tim's work and all the other great work there for the latest in the environmental community, both here locally and nationally. Just wanted to provide an update to folks as to where things are at with the Trump administration's offshore drilling proposal. Kind of back in action again, although with the government shutdown, we're all eyeing that February 8th date to see what happens now moving forward.
Right.
If there's going to be, if and when there'll be a meeting here in Providence for public input, we'll be sure to let you know. Talking about the solar tariff and, of course, where things are at with Invenergy. Tim Faulkner, I appreciate your taking the time to come in.
My pleasure, Kate.
Okay, I'll let
Anytime.
you go. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Business up at hand up at the State House. I'll let you go around the corner and I'll welcome my next guest
Sounds
in.
good.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Kate.